High Tech High Graduate School of Education online info session. The next hour we're going to be spending time together talking about our master's program and also a hybrid online program we have called the Education Leadership Academy. First, you're going to hear introductions from our three facilitators for tonight. Rob, I'll let you introduce yourself first.
Hi everyone, I'm Rob Reardon. I'm the president of the High Tech High Grad School of Ed.
Great. And Laura?
Hi, my name is Laura McBain. You won't see me because I'm doing the slide share tonight. My name is Laura McBain. You'll see my picture right down here. But I'm the program director for the Education Leadership Academy.
Okay, great. And I am Kelly Wilson. I direct the master's program and have been a teacher and a director in the High Tech High schools. So next you'll see our agenda for tonight. We're going to spend a little bit of time giving you an overview of our programs. We'll do that quickly so that we can get to what you probably want to hear most, which is experiences from our current students and alumni. And then we'll have time for Q&A at the end. So Rob is our GSU president. He was also a founder of High Tech High Schools, and he's going to share a little bit about how the GSE came to be and how it got started and what we are about.
Thank you, Kelly. High Tech High started in the year 2000, and from the very beginning, we knew that we wanted to conduct teaching and learning in ways that were not generally practiced in schools, and therefore we wanted to, and in particular, we wanted to bring students from a wide variety of backgrounds and experiences and ethnicities and social class and so forth together in an untracked environment, and to show the world that we could have students from very different backgrounds in the same classroom learning together, and that everyone benefits and no one is damaged. So that social class integration mission was very important to us. And as we were thinking about doing that, we realized also that we would be working with teachers. We would be hiring teachers who may have bought into that mission and may have bought into project-based learning as a way of making that mission come to fruition, but who had never experienced a project-based learning environment or an integrated, a truly integrated environment in their own learning. So that we knew also that we had to have an environment that was a rich learning environment for adults. So to summarize, I mean, really, there were two very important pieces from the very beginning. One was social class integration, and the other was to end social class segregation in schools, and the second was to end teacher isolation in schools. So from the very beginning, teachers came to work by contract an hour a day before the kids, and were engaged in all kinds of conversations and so on about teaching and learning and about the kids that they shared. We were trying to find ways to give teachers leverage in their efforts and contexts where they could grow. We were hiring teachers from industry mid-career who were qualified to teach in university but could not teach in our schools because they did not have a credential, and they had to go to school at night and pay money to somewhere else to learn to teach in ways that we didn't particularly want them to be teaching. So that led us to create our own credentialing program, an alternative pathway to the credential, and we were authorized by the state to do that in 2004, 4 years after we opened. And then a logical next step for us was to start a graduate school of education. But the same elements that really triggered the beginning of High Tech High also are present in the High Tech High Graduate School of Education. We're attempting to find ways to study and to address and to develop methods for integrated classrooms and for equitable teaching and learning. In other words, for social justice, education for social justice. And we're also trying to find ways to help adults in schools work productively together. What we're after really in our programs is, and what we hope will emerge by way of graduates, are educators who practice thoughtful inquiry and reflection, and who do that reflexively, educators who are prepared and practiced and committed to developing equitable and engaging learning environments, who look not just at a classroom, but at the context within that, the community within the school and the community outside the school as part of the learning environment. And then finally, educators who would lead for school change, whether from inside the classroom or from outside the classroom, giving rise to our two concentrations in our programs. One is Masters in Education with concentration in school leadership, and the other a concentration in teacher leadership. So that's it in a nutshell. Where we came from, and what we're after, and a little bit about how we're structured.
Great, thank you, Rob. So we have a few different ways that you can be involved in the GSD. One is in San Diego, the MED program, and there's two concentrations within that. A teacher leadership concentration, which is for experienced educators that want to deepen their teaching practice, exploring issues of pedagogy, deeper learning, innovation in their classroom, and also the intersection of that with issues of equity. And also develop as teacher leaders in their school. So be a support to improving the school, guiding collegial relationships, mentoring and supporting teachers. But they are experienced teachers that are not looking to move into administrative positions. Maybe they become curriculum designers or instructional coaches, but many just love teaching and want to develop their teaching craft and as teacher leaders in their settings. So that's a 2-year part-time program, or also a 1-year residency. We have a school leadership concentration, which is for those that aspire to lead a small, innovative school. And that is a 1-year residency model. So in that model, you come to San Diego, and you're embedded in one of our 12 high-tech high schools, and you're learning to lead through apprenticeship with a critical friend director that leads the school. So part of the beginning of the year is really building relationships and trust within the community, shadowing the director, but as time goes on, you're practicing more leadership and taking on more leadership at your school site, whether that's coaching teachers or guiding professional development, helping to support student issues, or working with families, but that's an apprenticeship model. In both programs, I think the philosophy is very much the same, and it's really one program, 2 concentrations with a lot of overlap and course taking together, but we want the experience to be personalized, authentic, and transformative. So when you start the program, we spend a lot of time together exploring through a personal learning plan what brought you here, what you hope to get through the experience, and making sure that through the master's project and also each of the projects that culminate for the courses, that you have voice and choice in shaping those projects, and that they feel authentic and in service to the ways that you would like to grow as an educator at your school, and also issues that you would like to tackle at your school, ways that you'd like to make your classrooms better, your school better, and engage students and colleagues in those efforts. So we talk a lot about shared leadership, leading from behind, building those collegial relationships, and model a lot of practices within the classes that you can bring right back to your school. The other piece is about transformation. So people doing our program often leave and say, I'm not only a different educator, but I am really transformed personally through the program. So we are looking to re-examine our beliefs about education, our beliefs about leadership, our beliefs about equity constantly through the program, and through a cohort-based model, push and kind of challenge each other to grow and think differently. The other option is the Education Leadership Academy. Those are for people that do not currently live in San Diego or wish to move to San Diego for the year, and it's a hybrid online program. Laura can share a little bit more about that opportunity.
Great, thanks Kelly. So essentially, one of the leading, which formerly now called the Education Leadership Academy, but you hear from Ellen, who was in our Leading Schools program, and what we're going to be talking about, one of the challenges that and opportunities we've had at High Tech High is we have a large number of visitors who get to visit our school, and they want to learn about what we do and how they can emulate some of the work that's happening at our school and their own schools. And so we developed a program, a hybrid program that allows educators to come here 3 times a year and then be engaged with a critical friend online using a platform such as this. And they're engaging in consultancies, readings, and at the same time developing a project for their own setting. Each of the schools that we work with come as a team, which means they work with some other members from their school to develop a project that will be of mutual benefit to themselves as well as to their school site. It's a project that they're working on to really ultimately transform their practice, as Kelly said, but then also think about how does this project have an impact their school setting and help transform their school into ideally this 21st century learning environment that we're all hoping for. And so this Education Leadership Academy, we have teams this year from Chile, Canada, New York, Kentucky, and Chicago. We've had folks from India, other people from Canada, Australia, and of course the US. So it really is an international program. And the questions that are coming up really is, how do we create this community of practice? And so Ellen here from today was in our program 2 years ago and is still doing some of the work that's connected. You'll hear about from her. That's connected back to the program work that she did with us. But really, we're really trying to create this program where people are engaging in deeper learning. They're engaging in this idea of equity in schools and really thinking about change leadership. And all those 3 combined, which are connected to our GSE principles, are really about how we're trying to really help educators and help schools really reimagine what their school settings look like. And of course, there are online readings, there are projects, there's lots of support, but it's really a really intense professional development program that's really aimed for helping teachers cultivate non-creative compliance, as Rob is showing us in the bottom screen. So, cultivating creative non-compliance, excuse me. So that's really a bit of the program, and then of course we'll jump into some more questions later. Thanks, Kelly.
Okay, great. I think we hit on this, but the whole benefit, I think, of being part of a graduate school of education that's fully embedded in K through 12 schools is that we are learning by doing. So we do not want your graduate experience to be separate from your daily practice, working with students and colleagues and families, but that we're constantly wrestling with ideas in the graduate school space. We're bringing those back to our settings. We're reflecting on how that goes with each other. We're going back and trying new things, but we're constantly learning by our experience and reflecting on our experience. The projects are personalized. They're very open-ended. There's a lot of different ways that you can explore them. For example, Melissa Agudelo, who's an alumni of the School Leadership Program, is going to speak in a moment. We had a project on using data to inform practice in the school leadership concentration, and she was really passionate and excited about hearing from our alumni and understanding their experience. So she formed a Facebook page, got hundreds of alumni, kind of mobilized and connected with each other, again, that hadn't been, did a survey, brought that to a faculty meeting, and looked at the survey data with faculty to reflect on how our students' high school experience were shaping their preparation for college and their experience beyond college, and involved students in the entire process. But another student in the exact same course, who was a leader of a school in Utah that was a private school, boarding school for boys on the spectrum, was working with teachers in designing their own mini action research projects in their classroom and collecting data from their students to inform their teaching practice. So same course, very different approaches to personalizing the work based on their passions and also where their passions intersected with an authentic need at the school site. Theory and practice, we see those things as very connected and informing one another. So while we're taking theory and we are applying that to our practice, we're also looking at craft knowledge in our own practice to inform theory through our master's project and some of our research projects. So that's one aspect throughout the entire graduate school experience, is where do we see those connections between theory and practice, and how do we contribute to that body of knowledge. Next, we are going to hear from students and alumni. Melissa is going to, the fellowships. All right, I'll touch on this quickly. So the priority application deadline for this year, I believe, is January 19th, and then we take rolling applications after that. We do give significant fellowships through the GSE for the teacher leadership and the school leadership concentration of the MED. For teacher leadership, we are able to offset the advertised tuition by about half, so the MED costs approximately $12,000 or in that ballpark, and that's through generous startup funds that we had when we started the Graduate School of Education, and knowing that we wanted to offer those fellowships while we were on the road to accreditation. We have been on an 8-year journey with WASC, and we should be having our final visit this spring to reach our full accreditation. We have candidacy status now, but part of the fellowships is to support students participating while we're on that journey. We also have full diversity fellowships that cover tuition, so it's really important to us that we have a diverse and rich cohort to enrich each other's thinking and experience throughout the program. That's something on your cover letter and application that you can request to be considered for that and share why. For the school leadership concentration, this year and next year through the Walton Family Foundation, we have full fellowships that cover tuition and also a partial living stipend, so $2,000 per month for the 11 months that you're here in San Diego, and then support after graduation. So after our fellows graduate, we have funding to keep them connected through an online professional learning community, so as they're out leading school, some for the first time, that we're getting together, we're sharing best practices, we're sharing dilemmas in the work that we're doing, and then also funding to fly them back to reconnect 3 times during that year, and also doing some tracking of kind of our impact in their schools through things like Youth Truth and school climate surveys. So full tuition and living stipend while you're here, but also an opportunity to stay connected and supported after graduation. And then teacher leadership resident fellowships. We're really trying to build the 1-year model for teacher leadership concentration, where you come here and, like the school leadership concentration, you're embedded for 1 year full-time in our schools, and you are working with a critical friend teacher, learning a lot about project-based learning, deeper learning, 21st century learning, all those buzzwords, but really doing that through practice and experience, and rather than staying in your school, doing that within the high-tech high schools. We are also working to bring in international students to our MED programs, and are in the process of being able to offer student visas for next year. And we are also able to give, through Title IV funding, student loans. We're able to support that now that we have candidacy status with WASC. That was in place for the first time this year. So if you have more questions about all of that through the application process, please let us know. But there's a lot of opportunity to be supported if you wish to apply. We're going to hear from students now. So Melissa is going to share, and we are curious about anything that she would like to share, but some of the bigger questions, Laura, if you go back for a second, just why did you choose the GSE? What stands out to you about your experience? And then how has your experience most influenced your current practice? So after graduating from the program, what's been sticky, or what's still part of your practice that was maybe new or different because you're part of the GSE?
So hello, my name is Melissa Agadello. I currently am Dean of Students at one of the high-tech schools, and I completed the school leadership program last year. Why I chose this particular GSE, in particular, as I was moving here from Virginia to San Diego and working in the high-tech model, I was interested in looking at school leadership and issues of school leadership through the lens of a progressive institution. I was really thinking a lot about what I had done for the 9 or 10 years I had been in education before arriving at high tech, and wanting a program that was going to really explore a lot of different notions of education, or give me a push in a different direction. And for me, the high tech high graduate school allowed me to do that, to really think a lot about different models and different kinds of educational programs. And we did that quite a bit in the program, from looking and analyzing outcomes from different types of charter schools, to thinking about our own model, to reading just from general texts about education, educational theory. There was a lot of that happened. What stands out to me about my experience is, gosh, One of the things I really loved about my experience was how much the work I did directly connected to what I was doing at my job site already. It was so easy to embed the projects and the assignments into and extending what I was already thinking about and encouraging me to really enrich my job and my thinking by adding activities that I may have done before, but I think it added a level of rigor to it and thinking that I'm not sure would have been there before, because with the support that I got in developing those ideas, I think they became so much richer. How has the experience influenced my current practice? You know, one of the things I often think about is one of the most wonderful thing about the classes to me was how many times we were put in mock situations to think through things, put in fish bowls, or put in experiences where we were given scenarios in so many, anything from school law to equity-based issues, and how much I grew from being put in those fish bowl situations and watching other people grapple with really difficult things, and myself figuring out, like, my gosh, what would I say in this situation, and experiencing school leadership through those small avenues constantly of, like, no, don't just read about what the issue is. We're going to throw you in there to a certain extent, and we're going to explore what it is that you would actually say. So that's what's often stuck with me the most. I would also say that as a school leader now, I would also say that I take those ideas of practicing things and using them into crucial conversations with students or with faculty as well. I think it's really informed the way I think about helping people think about big issues. So I would say that's probably the biggest, the first way I can think of lots of ways, but that's probably the biggest way that I think of that's influenced my practice. So.
Okay, wonderful. And because Melissa is not going to stay for the entire thing, I wanted her to share one more thing, and then we're going to move on to the next student. But do you mind sharing briefly what you did for your master's project, which was really fascinating?
Sure. So my master's project focused on student voice within school leadership. In particular, having taught all over the country, I have been active in student government, so ASBs or SCAs across the country, and I was always struck by how difficult the model was to I thought, bring out true leadership and student-based ideas when often it was mired in sort of what was supposed to happen, or elections that didn't necessarily give the student body actual voice, but just a small cohort of kind of popular kids. So for my work, I explored looking at a 100% voluntary ASB with no student government system, with no election structures, and how to truly facilitate a variety of students within school leadership in naming what they see as issues of importance at their school, in doing real work to address it, and then in producing real change. So that's what I worked on.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Melissa. And I think next we are going to hear from Juliet, who is a current school leadership resident, who is at High Tech Middle in Chula Vista.
All right. So I chose the GSA at High Tech High for a variety of reasons, but I think the most important two are something that Melissa touched on a little bit, of really getting a chance to see a different model of doing school, just a different approach that was very unique and really would push my thinking in a new direction. So I was really interested in that. And at the same time, I was thinking about the fact that as much as I wanted to take some time and really immerse myself in learning, I didn't want to leave schools. I love being in schools, and it really brings me joy to have kids, you know, coming into my office and saying hi. So I was looking for a program that would both give me experience in a progressive school, and that I could really still be immersed in the action while learning about the theory. So I found that the school leadership program at High Tech High was a perfect match for those two criteria that I was searching for. And as for what stands out for me now that I've been in the program for a few months, there's a couple of things. One of the most important is the relationships. So I was just reflecting as I was getting ready for this conversation on the different relationships that I've had the opportunity and pleasure to build over the last few months. Both with my critical friend director, who has already become an amazing mentor to me, to the cohort of other school leadership residents, who we were joking in class the other day. We hope that we can still call each other every time we have a dilemma and get amazing advice next year when we're off in different sites. So that's been really wonderful. And then both with the faculty in the school, the GSE faculty and students. So I've just learned so much from those interactions with those different groups of people, and I know that those are relationships that will stick with me and help me as I continue to learn over all the years. And then the second thing is the authenticity of the learning. I was talking to a friend recently, and I said I feel like I had sort of figured out how to play the role of student and what that means, but I really feel pushed in this program to make the learning authentic and make sure that I am putting in what I need to put in to get the most out. And I think that really speaks to the personalization that Kelly was talking about, that in order for me to really achieve my goals, there's great structures, but there's also this space for me to explore things that are interesting to me, things that I really want to pursue in order to feel prepared to be a school leader in the years that come. And I think in terms of influencing my practice, we talked about this a little bit, but I've really been able to question some of my assumptions and found it a very safe space to do that. And I think one example, Melissa was actually one of our faculty members along with Rob for a course on equity. And I went into it thinking, oh, I have some pretty clear understandings of equity. And I was surprised and inspired by how much my vision of equity grew through that course and the work that we did. And I think that is sort of a small representation of a larger phenomenon that I feel is happening as I go through this program, with it making me rethink the things and reimagine what I think is possible in schools.
Okay, great. Wonderful. Thank you, Julia. And Melissa was actually a co-instructor of the equity course. As an alumni, is now involved in teaching, and Julia just had the opportunity. Her director has been out on a medical leave, and so she has been in an interim director position these last few weeks and doing a phenomenal job. So there's a lot of different unexpected ways that we over time get to collaborate and work with each other. Okay, great. And next we have formerly called the Leading Schools program, now the Education Leadership Academy. This is the hybrid online program open to educators from around the country but also around the world that are engaged in school change efforts, often working together as teams. So we're going to hear a little bit from Ellen about her experience.
Hi, my name's Ellen Wright, and the school that I am teaching in is in Toronto, and I was really fortunate to come to this program with 3 other colleagues, and the school had really embraced the whole exploration with High Tech High. We were the second group that that had the opportunity to go to San Diego, and it was an incredible, uplifting, inspiring experience, partly because just even to hear people say, bring your passion to your job, was such an unusual way of thinking about teaching. And in my experience, where there had been a lot of expectations to follow documents and follow ministry, the curriculum that's sort of laid out for you, or the standards that are laid out for you, and how it was really important, in fact, to change education means you bring yourself as an educator into the whole classroom experience with your kids, and that you are responsible for what happens with those kids in a much bigger way. And being able to have discussions with colleagues that were much more focused, and we read things together. We'd stop in the hall, we'd talk about what we read, we'd have coffee, we'd send each other an email quickly over the weekend. Did you read this part? Did you see this quote? I love this part. And it just began a whole dialogue amongst us as professionals that was really new, and a fantastic model for being the thoughtful, reflective educators that we were realizing we actually could embrace that model, that was something we could do. And so that's also a model that our school, we continue to have readings, we continue to sort of chat about and make little jokes. Oh, I know what book you've read, and that kind of dialogue, I think, is it's really important, so that you're not just. I worked in schools where you went to the lunchroom and you heard people rag about kids, and here what we're doing is we're really thinking about thinking and thinking about learning, and why didn't something work as well as we thought, and what could we do to make it better, and what were we assuming, and how was an assumption detrimental to a kid or to a student's experience of learning in a classroom, and what can we do about that? So I think the High Tech High program, especially the Leading Schools program, when you bring a group together like that, we're always connected. We always see each other, and it's a different kind of conversation we have because we've had that experience together, and it helps to create a whole big picture thrust within the whole building. And I think we all have incredibly great fond memories of the whole experience, and we're still, three of us are still working on projects that we began in that opportunity. So that says a lot too, I think. I'm not sure how much to say.
Okay, great. No, that was wonderful. And do you mind sharing one of the projects that you engaged in with your colleagues?
Oh, with my colleagues, or the project that I did with
the project that you did, yeah, whatever you'd like to share. You just mentioned that some of those were still ongoing for you, and I'm curious what you've been working on.
So the project that is up on the screen is a project that I began at High Tech High, and that has evolved gently but in very large ways in some respects. I just did it myself the first year, and the science teacher, not the science teacher, the history teacher got very interested, and so we did it together the second year. And each year we tweaked it, and we've added more, and we've talked more, and we've gotten more excited about it, and the kids have done more, and it's one of those blossoming sort of experiences for us and for what we've seen the kids do with the project. So what's in front of you on the screen, the history teacher asked the students to go back home and interview a grandparent or an extended family member and to ask about their lives before 1950. We actually drew the date because we found when they were just bringing in photos of their parents that it was too close, and they were too close to it to really appreciate the stories they were being told. But that when we sent them back farther and they had to dig a bit and actually call a grandparent, and the grandparents sat down with them and went through photo albums with them, that they learned about events in history that they would not have paid as much attention to. They had the print at the top, the red image with the eyes. This girl learned about her great-grandfather, whose name her sister has as a first name, and that he had been in the trenches in World War I, and she went through this whole experience of trying to draw his face, and then she got to drawing the eyes, and she said, I'm trying to draw his eyes, and I realize I'm trying to that he's scared, but I don't know how to do that, and that to be in the trenches when bombs are falling must have been an incredibly scary experience. And he lived, and it's an amazing thing that he lived, and I'm actually here because he somehow lived through that experience. And she'd never had any sort of understanding about what either of the wars had been before, and so that she did a whole number of, these are all prints that are made with ink and rollers and rubber images that are reused in a number of ways, and she just came out of it with a whole different experience of not only her grandparents but what war meant and the effect of war. And on the bottom is a print that's an image of a slave in a sugar cane field. And this girl's parents was an interracial marriage, and it was her Caucasian father who said to her, you really should know where your grandparents came from, and your grandparents were indentured laborers, and this is part of your history, and your mother is now here. Her parents brought her to Canada. She's educated. She's a lawyer. She has really, taken her family's efforts to improve their lives to heart, and that's why you're in the school you're in. That's why we want you to know these things, that you take these on as part of your heritage, and it had an incredible impact on her. They had to bring in family documents, and she saw some of the documents that were from her grandparents and great-grandparents, and their immigration papers and their marriage certificates, and papers that showed that they were that they were documented as people of color, and they had different rights than the rest of the people who would have filled out a form, and that was all new, big learning for her. And what the history teacher and I keep saying is we want them to understand they're part of history. So in the spring, the kids came in, or the parents came in. The kids shared their their artwork with their parents, and the parents were completely blown away and amazed that how much their kids had understood about their family history, and they brought in their grandparents and showed their grandparents how to make a print and had their grandparents sign their names beside theirs on a print, and it was an incredibly moving experience. So in the end, we thought, you know, they've caught the connection that history is not about other people. It's about you, and it's about your parents. And when we talk about immigration, that's your family, and that's who you know, and it affects everybody. And so it has changed, I think, the way they see their position in society and their opportunities that they've been given, and the responsibility they have. Sorry to go on.
No, beautiful story, and I think a great example of what we've seen with a lot of our teams of jumping in, trying things yourselves, and bringing kind of colleagues along with you. So it was very interesting to hear not only the impact on the students, which it sounds like was very deep and profound, but also in beginning to work with other teachers and kind of growing a project and a collaboration, even though the first year you kind of jumped in and started yourself. We are going to open this up now and use the rest of our time for Q&A. So Laura, do you want to just share with our participants how to share their questions with us?
Yeah, so basically I've already been given some questions. We have a number of people that are watching in real time. You, of course, can continue to post questions through Twitter, which is just pound or hashtag #HighTechHigh, which is all spelled out, or you can watch on the Google+. But I will just jump in with some questions from the folks who are actually watching right now. So we have a couple of people watching. One teacher, we have a lovely woman named Lisa, who is from Oakland right now, and she's currently thinking of moving to San Diego, and she's currently an education coach / teacher, and she's loving what Melissa is saying about equity and passion when everyone's mentioning about how do we build equitable schools. And a lot of things she's wondering about is for the Teacher Leadership Residency Fellowship, are the fellows teaching full-time? Are they connected with a critical friend? Can you talk a little bit more about the structure for the Teacher Leadership Fellowship? And then I'll have a separate question continued with that as well.
Okay, great. Yeah, for the Teacher Leadership Fellowship, we've approached it in different ways with different residents, so it definitely is something that we co-construct or co-design with the students based on their interests. But typically, you are embedded in one of the schools, so we work with you to see if elementary, middle, or high school is where you'd like to spend your time. And then we make sure that you have a good fit with a critical friend. So there is a teacher that is your critical friend, and you're embedded within not only their classroom, but within a teaching team structure where you're working with a group of colleagues that share the same students and are developing projects together that that span the disciplines. So, you know, with the Teacher Leadership Program, we really want you to have practice teaching in perhaps a new way for you, and in this type of environment, a lot of opportunity to collaborate and connect with colleagues, but then also opportunity to develop as teacher leaders. So through the different course projects, you are also in the field work finding ways to push and stretch yourself as a coach, as a colleague, as someone who's engaged in supporting school change efforts. But again, how you choose and where you choose to push yourself is something that you are part of designing, and it's very personalized, and your peers and your advisor support that process.
Great. We have another person, Nate from St. Paul, Minnesota, is wondering really about primarily what is the teaching load? What is the actual teaching load? What does the typical day look like? He's kind of curious about what is the typical teaching load for someone who's in one of these programs. Would they be lead teachers? Are they team teaching? Are they moving in and out of the classrooms? What does that look like for those folks who are also in the program full-time and then also working at High Tech High?
Okay, Great. Rob, feel free to jump in as well on this. But I can start us off. So a typical teaching load is similar to what our teachers experience in our school. So typically, out of a 5-period day, you're teaching 4 of those periods. But we have had some residents that, through the nature of their project, are maybe spending half the day with the teaching team and half the day engaged in other leadership work or other work that's relevant to their master's project. So, for example, we had a student here last year who was really interested in community organizing and how to connect the school to the larger community, to maker movements, and kind of bringing people into the school and building things, doing things, and connecting in different ways. So a lot of his work was with that, and also a student radio that was going on at this school. So he was part of the time embedded with the teaching team and part of the time working on these other projects. So there's not one way of doing it, and it really depends on your personal learning plan and what you hope to get out of the experience. We also have something called an 80-20 time, which we talk about, which is having about 80% of the time really being embedded within a particular school, so that as you're learning, as you're putting things to practice and then reflecting on that, that you are not feeling like an outsider to that community, that you're a graduate student coming in and kind of doing things and then leaving, but that you're really an integral and connected part of the school community, of relationships with the teachers and the students. But we also know that if you're in San Diego for a year, you may want to get out to the other high-tech high schools, you might want to shadow different leaders, you might want to see other schools in the area. So we try to build in 20% time, which supports you in reaching out and having other experiences beyond the work with your critical friend and teaching team at your school site.
So if you're a high school math teacher, you find yourself working alongside, you would not be teaching your own classroom. You would be teaching alongside a high-tech high teacher. And we recognize that there's a benefit to have a long-term relationship with a colleague in a classroom, but there's also a benefit to getting out and seeing a variety of classrooms and so on. So we try to strike that balance. The other thing is, for example, if you were a high-tech high math teacher who had a passionate interest in working with kids who are struggling in math, you might find yourself in a role where you were going from classroom to classroom, or working alongside some of our resource specialists, our inclusion specialists in classrooms and so forth. So there are lots of different ways that you might kind of get involved.
Great. I have another question. Erin here, who's also here in San Diego, is basically, she's what we often love at our school are people that are switching careers, people that have explored other options and are now really getting into education. And so she's interested in getting back into the classroom. She's not currently an educator, although she does work, and it sounds like I won't reveal what she does, but I would protect her stuff. But Billy, she does a lot of project work already, and so she's kind of interested in talking, if she could hear a little bit about that transition and what opportunities are available to her or someone like her in our area or outside of our area as well.
Kelly, you can chime in. I think it's important to say that our students in the teacher leadership program really need to have a context in the 2-year program, need to have a context where they are working with kids. It's not always a classroom. We've had students we had a student who was working in the Chula Vista Public Library system, for example, but she was working with kids. So you need to have a context. And that's the one kind of requirement. The other thing to remember, too, I think, is that the teacher leadership program is essentially a program for experienced teachers. And that may mean a classroom experience of 3 years or so, or it may mean experience in other kinds of learning settings with kids.
We also have an intern credentialing program. So if you are someone really kind of brand new to education and thinking about a career change, there is a pathway there to potentially apply to work as a teacher in our schools and earn your teaching credential while you're doing that as well. And that's for newer teachers or folks that are newer to education.
We are certainly interested in folks who are doing that transition. many of our teachers are mid-career transfers, and what Kelly has just described is the pathway for doing that.
It's ringing. Lisa in Oakland was also wondering, is there an opportunity to do some on-site visits to people to actually, for those who don't live in this area, who don't know much about High Tech High, is there an opportunity for them to come and visit, observe the schools before they begin the application process?
Absolutely, we would love that. We have thousands of visitors every year in our schools, and we'd be happy, someone from the GSU would be happy to meet with you too. You could observe a classroom, you could even spend some time, I'm sure, with some of our residents that are in our schools and pick their brains about how that's going. So the best way to do that is to probably reach out to Haley Bjergesen. If you go onto the High Tech High Graduate School of Education website and click on professional development opportunities, there's a way to visit the schools. But you can also, if you struggle to find that, you can always email me as well. I'm Kay Wilson at hightechhigh.org, and I'm happy to get you connected.
Great. So that's most of our questions. Is there any kind of final things you want to address, folks? Unless my audience has other questions. But if there are other things you want to share, please do so.
Well, and I'd love to know if there are any other questions directed towards our students. I know Melissa had to go, but Juliet and Ellen are still here. Are there any other questions just about how they have experienced the program?
I think one question that Lisa was asking, and she was really directing it at Melissa, but I think other folks can talk about it, is she was really wondering about this question of voice, student voice and progressive models in education, with particularly around equity, which is very important. How is that, really excited to hear about traditional and non-traditional leadership opportunities for students. Is that something unique to High Tech High, or is that something that we embed in our programs, this idea of how do we embed student voice and progressive education into part of what we're doing?
Well, I can chat a little bit about how I see it happening both in some of our grad school classes, but then also in the school. I'm at a middle school, and I think, when we think about student voice, sometimes we think about it in terms of, student leadership and definitely ASB or student government. But I think there's also a really rich conversation happening around student voice at the school that I'm in terms of project co-design, so thinking about how students can work with teachers to design their projects. In the same way that we've talked about in the grad school, we as students have voice and choice in thinking about what learning is going to be most engaging and meaningful to us, bringing that same conversation down to secondary and to students, when they're in 6th grade, talking to them about what are you really motivated and excited about. So I think there's a lot of complexity and richness in that conversation, and I've enjoyed having it in a context where teachers can experiment and try out different modes of doing that sort of co-creation with students.
Great. And then one last question that's coming in with respect to the combination between credentialing or GSE. Is there another way people can connect between both of those programs? Perhaps, Kelly, you can talk about that.
Okay, yeah, so the intern credentialing program is separate from the GSE. So to be involved, it is not a traditional credentialing program that's offered through a graduate school of education. It's an intern credentialing program that we do in partnership with the state. So you either need to be employed at High Tech High, either part-time or full-time, or with one of our partner schools. So the best process for that is to apply to High Tech High schools, and you can also meet with Julie Holmes or email her just to find more out about credentialing, but it's not an application that you do through the GSE.
And then one more question is it required, for example, for all the High Tech High teachers to come through with the induction process? So if someone actually has their credential, their clear credential, do they have to go through that induction process as well? Can you talk about that? Someone who's probably moving into our GSE but maybe doesn't have their clear credential, something like that. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah. So there's no requirement that you've done induction to apply to the MED program, either for school leadership or for the teacher leadership concentration. Most people do have a teaching credential, but we do have some people that have worked in private schools and have not needed a teaching credential but have a lot of experience in education, either teaching and or leading schools. So it's not a MED GSE requirement to do induction. If you're hired at High Tech High and you have a preliminary credential, you do have to clear that credential through the High Tech High induction program. But that's if you're an employee at High Tech High and perhaps you already have your credential, but to clear it, you do go through our induction.
Great. I think that's wrapping us up for the few questions. Is there anything else folks want to share before we finish up the day?
I just want to echo the invitation to reach out to us if you have questions as you're working through the application process. If you'd like to come and spend time at our schools, I think it's really important to do that to get a sense of the space. I mean, we can describe it and we can try to articulate our philosophy and what we're about, but there's nothing like being here and spending time in classrooms. So I encourage you, if you have the opportunity, to reach out to us and come spend a day with us. Rob, do you want to share anything else?
I think you've said it all, Kelly. But we hope to see some of you who are online with us now in person.
And I just want to thank everyone. We're really excited about having more folks in our academy and having a whole bank of schools that are schools in urban settings, rural settings, and international settings. And so we really look forward to working with schools from all over the world that are coming here and kind of thinking about the similar questions that we're addressing. So thank you all so much.
And thank you to Ellen and Juliet to being here with us and sharing your experiences, and Melissa, who had to run to get one of her 3 daughters to something or another, I think softball, but all for being here.
Great.
Thank you.
Guys.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks a lot. Bye, everybody.
Good
Bye.
night. We'll be off air in just 2 seconds.